Welcome to the No Budget Indie Filmcast, where we dip into the independent film universe to highlight those little films that you might not have heard about elsewhere. Will you agree with our panel, or will our panel agree with each other? Tune in to find out. I am Milo Denniston, and with me, as always, is Claire Milan.
Hello.
And Cathal Feeney.
Hello.
All right, Cathal, what's on the agenda this week?
This week, we are reviewing a film called Afghanistan, The Great Game, a personal review by Rory Stewart. Now, for our international viewers, if there are any, Rory Stewart is a politician. He's an ex-politician now. He was a minister in two governments where he served under David Cameron and Theresa May. And he contested the leadership of the Conservative Party when Theresa May resigned, and he lost out to Boris Johnson. And he resigned the Conservative Party after that because he said he didn't want to serve under Boris Johnson. Now, prior to that, going back, he was a diplomat. He served in Indonesia, Montenegro, I think. And he left that, and he went on a 21-month walking tour of Iran, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nepal. And he wrote a book which became a New York Times bestseller. And the title of that book is, I'm going to find it there in a second, The Places in Between. So, and also, interestingly, he was reputed to have been a member of MI6, even though he denies it. When he was a student, he was a personal tutor to Prince William and Prince Harry. So he's an interesting guy, and he is quite knowledgeable on this part of the world. So I think it was sort of important to give you a bit of background into this guy. So this documentary, it's actually a documentary in two parts, and it tells the story of Afghanistan from the point of view of its sort of geopolitical significance, and it starts first of all sort of in the middle of the 19th century when it was invaded by the British Empire, and they were shunted back, and then they, I don't know, sometime later they tried again, and then they stayed for a while again, and then they were sent back. And then it sort of moves forward to the Soviet invasion of 1979, and it sort of touches a bit then on the American or the USA invasion in 2001 or 2, whenever that was. So one. Okay, so he goes to these places. He visits kind of these small villages. He talks to the locals. He talks to experts, Afghanis, and both there and abroad. And it's very interesting. And it kind of it does give you a sort of an insight and a background into the country, which is obviously very, very topical, very current at the moment, and sort of explains why it became known, or why it is known as the graveyard of empires.
Yeah, it was really, because I didn't know much about Afghanistan, and obviously it's very topical at the moment. So it was interesting. So I was looking for a documentary to watch and to give me a bit of a history to it, and I definitely think this is the one to watch. And I don't know how biased it is. It's very hard to know because I'm not extremely familiar with Afghanistan, but it just comes across like a country that's been absolutely battered and invaded. And there was one line he said in it, that it's easy to get in, but it's hard to get out, or something like that. And it's because it is crazy what's happening at the moment. But it was, yeah, I didn't know that he was actually a politician. And he seems to speak the local language as well. I don't know what language he was speaking. And he goes to Russia at one stage and interviews people there, and goes to the US. And yeah, it's very, very informative documentary, and just really heartbreaking as well to realize that what's happening at the moment. And it's sad because even some of the people in those documentaries, like in the documentary, you see little kids playing in the background when he's speaking to some man, and you just wonder, like, where are they now and what the situation is like. But it's such a volatile environment, and yeah, it's so hard to know, will there ever be peace there again? Looking at this documentary, yeah, it's just very, very heartbreaking. But yeah, it's a very well done documentary, very informative, and I would advise everyone to watch it.
Yeah, it is really informative. What's about it too is like watching it, how they kind of put in all these like dramatic shots of him. Like they've got scenes where he's doing a voiceover, but then he's kind of in the background looking longingly at the city in the distance, or shots of him walking through the markets. And so they have all these like funny shots in there that are just like, look how serious I am and how dramatic this thing is. But barring that, you're absolutely right. It is super informative documentary. Like most people in the US, I first heard the name Afghanistan when watching Rambo 2, when Rambo went into Afghanistan and fought the Russians. And then, of course, didn't really hear about it again until the Twin Towers attack. And so it is interesting, like how governments around the world don't learn from history. Like every country that has tried to go into Afghanistan has failed, yet for some reason they seem to do it. And not only that, they seem completely unwilling to acknowledge that they can't, win in Afghanistan. And so they just draw out these wars. The British with their 2 attempts, the Russians for 9 years, the US for nearly 20 years. And it's just like, because they don't want to admit that they lost. And so they just stay there forever. And then, yeah, as soon as they leave, it just goes back to the way it was. And the lesson is unfortunately, you need to let Afghanistan do whatever it's going to do and rule itself. But yeah, such an informative documentary, like really well done in regards to the history of the country and why it plays such a vital role in Western politics and geopolitical history based on where it's located.
And it's such a rural country. Like they were saying that there's loads of tribes or loads of villages, and it's so rural, and there's tribesmen, they're heads of villages. So there's so many different like languages and cultures within Afghanistan. It'd be impossible nearly to have one ruler. And it's it's something that's completely misunderstood. And a really fascinating thing I never heard of. There was this American woman who funded. If we can, what's the name of the group? How do you pronounce them again?
Mujahideen.
But it's just fascinating that she helped fund them with a guy called Charlie Wilson, which is a film actually, Charlie Wilson's War, starring Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts. And her name is, what's her name?
Well, she didn't necessarily fund them, but she encouraged the U.S. government to add more funding to the fight against the Russians. Then, yeah.
It was.
I just thought I never even heard. Like I heard of Charlie Wilson's War, but this woman, that she encouraged funding for the group in Afghanistan. It was
Well, like it was. A mile I was fond about the actual filming. There was a very funny scene when he was walking through the market, and you just see everybody kind of looking at it really strange. You're like, and then there's this, I think this one kid follows him and everything. But that was very funny actually. But that's like the Soviet invasion really set the seeds for what followed, because people obviously the Taliban, are sort of back in the driving seat now. But prior to 1990, there was no real history of that sort of level of fundamentalism. Like it was an Islamic society, and when the British invaded first, and even the second time, that it was that they tried to impose their culture, and it was like an insult to the Afghanis, and that was the one that was the impetus to drive them out. But it was really after when the Soviets pulled out that that the kind of this Islamic fundamental Taliban kind of rose, and that Osama bin Laden, he was kind of one of the reasons for that, because they got a lot of money from Saudi Arabia for that proxy war as well.
It's a very complicated history. Actually, that woman's name is Joanne Herring, who was going out with Charlie Wilson.
Okay.
But it's fascinating that he actually met her as well. He went to one of her fundraisers and she wanted to help the Afghan people. But it's just really interesting. I just thought it was a real eye-opener, this whole documentary. And because the first part goes way back. And then the second part, it's nearly more interesting because you can see videos and it's leading up to, well, I don't know when this was filmed. When was this filmed?
2011.
2011. So it's crazy to think that's 10 years ago. So I definitely think he should make part 3. And I'm glad the comments underneath said he should really go back or even just make part 3, because so much has happened in 10 years.
To go back now, I think it would be.
Yeah, maybe give it a year or two.
Yeah, maybe give it a year or two, and then we don't know what's going to happen. Like, obviously, we don't want him to go back into Afghanistan now. And did you say, Carl, he spent 21 days walking, or 21 weeks?
Months.
21 months walking, like Iran, Iraq.
Yeah. I stayed in 500 houses, villages over the time. I just read a little summary of the book, and seemingly he was attacked by people and wolves on his journey. So actually, I'm thinking I might check that book out.
I must check it out. And actually, he mentions in the documentary, the last time he met a Taliban leader, because he goes into a kind of compound, a gun was held to his head, and then he goes in to meet this. I think it was a Taliban leader. Was he? He was one of the leaders or something. But yeah, it was just really interesting. Yeah.
All right, rating time.
Okay, so for me, I have to give it 5 stars. I mean, I think because it's so informative, I think everyone who really wants to know what's happening at the moment should really watch this documentary, part 1 and 2. I know it's a little bit dated, and I'd love to have seen, because it was filmed in 2011, but I have to give it 5 stars because everyone has to watch this and they'll understand better, like myself, what's going on now.
Yeah. I agree. It's brilliant film, super informative. I'm going to go 4 stars. And the only reason I'm not doing 5 is just because some of the douchey, I'm such a serious filmmaker and reporter shots were kind of annoying to me. And it's just I don't care about you looking seriously into the distance or, any of that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm dropping them a star. But in regards to content, absolutely worth watching.
Well, I agree. I'm seeing it's very, very interesting, very, very well made, everything. I'm going to give it 4 stars. And that's I suppose the reason is, generally speaking, documentaries are a very, very high standard. And you can generally give them all 5 stars. So I have to leave room for something that's just aware. That's really brilliant. So, it's a high book.
All right. Well, there you have it, No Budget listeners and watchers. We recommend this. Absolutely informative. So go check it out. It's called, what's it called again, Carl?
Afghanistan, The Great Game, a personal view by Rory Stewart. And we'll leave the link below.
There we go. Let us know what you think at No Budget Show on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or leave us a comment. And with that, we'll say goodbye and see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.